They told me my inheritance was worthless swamp land. I turned it into the kind of justice you can hear and smell. 79 illegal mansions drowned in muddy lake water. A corrupt HOA crumbled in a single weekend. And the HOA president stood there in her $800 designer boots, watching the lake reclaim what had always been mine. Before we move forward, I want to hear from you. Drop your own HOA horror story in the comments, and tell me where you're watching from. Hit subscribe and tap the bell if you love true stories where property rights and federal water, law beat greed and corruption. Share this with a friend who's ever tangled with a homeowners association and felt powerless, because this revenge tale turns the tables. Cordelia Ashworth Banks. She had all the care and energy in the world. HOA president of Willowbrook Estates, planted near my shoreline like she owned the horizon. The stink of rotting cattails mixed with chlorine and panic as a wall of water slid across her lakeside paradise. Those old dam controls howled when I opened them, iron complaining in a language only mechanics and stubborn men understand, but not near as loud as she did. That morning was the end of a long road. 6 months earlier, I was Wade Thornfield, a 52-year-old electrician from Billings, Montana, divorced, recently laid off from plant, and trying not to let the emptiness swallow me when the lawyer called about my great-uncle Ezra's will. The way he said I'd inherited 847 acres, including something called Thornfield Lake, made it sound like I'd won a broken lawnmower at a church raffle. Been in your family since 1923, he said, but honestly, Wade, it's mostly wetland. Good for duck hunting. Not much else. I drove 6 hours out of Billings with more dread than hope, wondering whether Uncle Ezra had handed me a lifeline or a tax sinkhole. Ezra was a legend in our family, part hermit, part genius. He always smelled like engine oil and fresh-cut grass, and talked about the land like it was a living thing he'd sworn to protect. People said time got him out there on his own. When I crested the ridge and saw Thornfield Lake for the first time, I understood why he never left. 800 acres of spring-fed water lay glassy and clean, even in drought-stricken Montana. The old homestead sat on a rise that could see the whole world, the equipment barn tucked beside a generator shed, and a low earthen concrete dam Ezra had built in the 1940s. The air tasted like prairie grass and minerals. When I called out just to hear my voice bounce back, it came to me from the far shore, clear as a bell. That's when the white Escalade chuffed up the gravel, like it owned the place. A woman in head-to-toe beige stepped out, all designer, outdoorsy clothes and manicured nails. The kind of outfit you wear for a photo shoot, not fence work. She smiled the way people smile when they're about to sell you something you don't need. Oh, honey, you must be Ezra's nephew. Her voice had that lacquered sweetness reserved for waiters and repairmen, and anyone she'd already decided was beneath her. I'm Cordelia Ashworth Banks, president of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. We're your new neighbors. Neighbors, sure. Willowbrook Estates border my land, and her HOA had been circling Uncle Ezra's property like a hawk watching a rabbit with a limp. She held a clipboard like it contained the 10 Commandments. I know this must feel overwhelming, she said. All this wetland. The boundary situation is complex, and there are environmental concerns. Honestly, it's more trouble than it's worth. She slid out a folded offer like a magician. $15,000 cash. We can close next week. You'll walk away clean before the legal complications become your problem. I laughed out loud. This land's been ours for a century, I said. I'll hold on to it. Her smile stayed while her eyes hardened. I certainly hope you've done your research on local ordinances. The county takes environmental violations very seriously. Boundary disputes can be quite expensive. She mentioned, as if in passing, that Willowbrook had excellent relationships at the county planning office. Then she slid back into her SUV. The threat hung in the air like hot diesel. That evening, walking my fence line, I found survey flags I'd never seen. Tucked against a post was a set of architectural drawings. Willowbrook Lake Resort, Phase 1, 79 luxury cabins. Suddenly, her generous offer made all the sense in the world. She wasn't trying to help me. She'd been trying to steal my inheritance with phony paperwork and muscle from bought-off officials. The attack arrived dressed up as bureaucracy, which is the most dangerous costume there is. 3 days after her visit, I got a certified letter, a formal complaint from the county stating my dam was out of compliance with flood management rules. According to Cordelia's evidence, a brand new survey done by Randy Banks, her brother-in-law, Thornfield Lake had grown 5 arms and swallowed HOA land. Randy couldn't have surveyed a parking lot straight, and now he was suddenly an expert on a federal land grant laid down in 1923. Time to get educated. My old man used to say the courthouse is where truth goes to die. Sometimes, though, it's where it takes its last stand. The county clerk, God bless her, charged me $5 for photocopies of the original land grant and smiled like she was handing me a key. Uncle Ezra's paperwork was immaculate. The 1923 grant spelled out every boundary, every water right, and included a 200-foot buffer that sliced right through Cordelia's playground. I kept digging through dusty folders, following the smell of paper and old glue, and found a pattern that turned my stomach. Neighbor after neighbor who had refused Cordelia's offers had been slapped with charges: illegal wetland modification, groundwater contamination. Each complaint filed by the same concerned citizen, rubber stamped by the same planning director, Margaret Chase, Cordelia's tennis partner at the country club. Follow the money, follow the relationships, follow the timeline. Corruption looks like chaos up close. On a wall, it looks like a straight line. But paperwork alone wasn't enough. I needed a surveyor with federal certification, someone whose work couldn't be tossed out by a friendly judge. Tom Jensen drove out with a GPS rig and a dog-eared copy of the original grant. He mapped my land using the coordinates set down by the U.S. government a century ago. When he finished, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Wade," he said, dabbing sweat even in the October cold, "your neighbors have been squatting on federal land for 15 years. The tennis courts, the community pool, walking trails, the dam fountain, they're all on your side of the line. Here's the thing most folks don't know. Original federal land grants are king. They trump whatever came after: local zoning, HOA bylaws, even county ordinances. When Uncle Sam draws lines in 1923, the map doesn't change because someone lays sod in 2009. I printed boundary maps on Ezra's old generator that night. The diesel hummed a little lullaby of purpose. At sunrise, I called Cordelia as chirpy as a mockingbird. "Just a heads up," I said, "I'll be installing new property markers today." "What kind of markers?" Her voice iced over. "Concrete with coordinates. Turns out your tennis courts, pool, fountain, and a chunk of your walking trails are on my land. Don't worry, I'll have the no trespassing signs up by noon. Tell your members they'll need a new place to play." The silence on the line was like the hold your breath moment before a storm. By lunchtime, fresh markers ringed their paradise like tombstones. Concrete cured in the sun while HOA residents clustered in designer leisure wear, pointing at signs that declared their amenities illegal. Chlorine, fresh cement, and outrage made a smell I'll remember to my dying day. Cordelia's Escalade stormed in like an air raid. She clambered out, face tight enough to crack. "This is harassment," she shrieked across the line. "I'll have you arrested." "For what?" "Standing on my own property." I waved the federal survey like a flag. "You're the one trespassing." She threatened lawsuits and injunctions, and her brother-in-law the sheriff. I countered with 15 years of unlawful use, and a bill that would make her head spin. If she couldn't win the boundaries, she'd come for the dam. 2 weeks later, I opened a certified letter demanding an emergency environmental impact assessment. The county claimed my 80-year-old structure posed catastrophic flood risk to downstream homes. Price tag, $50,000. For a guy on unemployment, that might as well have been $1 million. I crawled inside the dam, a flashlight, breathing damp earth and history. Ezra had hidden a concrete masterpiece beneath that earthen berm. Reinforced walls, steel mesh to stop erosion, drainage channels that could teach a college class. It smelled like cured concrete and faint rust, the scent of things built to outlast their makers. This wasn't a farmer's weekend project. It was WP-era engineering designed to survive an apocalypse. While I was chewing on that, I dug into insurance records at the courthouse. The HOA had flood insurance on 79 planned cabin sites, specifically naming risk of upstream dam failure. She wasn't trying to protect against floods. She was planning to cash in if my dam failed and wiped out her development. Permit fraud, false surveys, and an insurance scheme? Cordelia had layered her grift like a wedding cake. So I gave her a lesson in water law. Great-granddad's 1923 irrigation permit gave us senior water rights to every drop through that dam. First in time, first in right. My ex-wife's lawyer tried to mess with our well once. I'd done my homework then, and did it again now. One perfect Thursday morning, I made a legal adjustment to the release valves, reducing downstream flow by 30%. Agricultural maintenance under my permit, nothing more. By lunch, Willowbrook's Shopey's Creek was a trickle. The fountain gassed itself to sleep, and flower beds started wilting under the lost mist. The smell of grass dying badly mixed with cheap chlorine. HOA heroes dragged hoses out like cavalry and started bucketing pool water to save their landscaping. The ugliest little bucket brigade you've ever seen. Cordelia called foaming. "You lunatic, what did you do to our water?" "Exercising my rights," I told her, watching a great blue heron wade to the shallow creek, head cocked like it was asking the same question. 1,923 beats your sprinklers by 9 decades. You want it back? Drop your complaints and acknowledge the property lines. Then we'll talk. That night, the county sent a real engineer. After 3 hours crawling the dam's hidden passages and reading Ezra's maintenance logs, he came out grinning like he'd found gold. "This is the finest small-scale dam I've seen in 20 years, he said. His report used the word exemplary. Cordelia's catastrophic flood risk complaint got stamped frivolous in red ink you could probably see from space. I restored full flow the next morning. Not because I had to, but because 8 hours of HOA chaos had filled my entertainment quota. The HOA held an emergency meeting that evening. Residents tore into Cordelia like she'd keyed their cars. Her vice president stood up with fire in her eyes and asked why they kept poking the bear instead of negotiating like adults. For the first time, I saw a crack in Cordelia's glossy temper. She responded with bulldozers. They arrived before dawn on Monday, screaming diesel into birdsong. I stood on my porch with coffee halfway in my mouth and watched century-old cottonwoods fall into my lake with cannon-shot thuds. Cordelia had conjured emergency development permits, overnight signed by Margaret Chase, the planning director with the country club smile. The paperwork waved flood risk as a magic wand to justify immediate replacement housing for displaced residents. It was organized crime with letterhead. By noon, the water ran soupy with fuel and sawdust. Wildflowers were choked to death by the smell of chainsaw exhaust. Jackhammers replaced loon calls. Concrete trucks lined up like an invading army, pouring foundations for $500,000 cabins where deer had grazed that morning. And then I found Luna. She was a young doe who'd come to the shallows every dawn for 3 months, delicate and cautious, ears flicking for danger that never came. Until now. I found her tangled in construction wire, drowned in muddy runoff that tasted like diesel and concrete washout. Her eyes stared at nothing while rainbow fuel slicks spun circles around her. The stink of death and chemicals burned my throat. I cut her free and buried her by the old fishing spot. That was the last time I played defense. I called Rebecca Martinez, an environmental journalist known for sinking her teeth into small-town corruption until it stopped twitching. I sent photos. Luna, the dead fish, cottonwood giants floating like corpses. "This looks like a war zone," she said. I emailed her the emergency permits with signatures dated before the emergency was even declared. Her story exploded online. Corporate greed destroys century-old wildlife preserve. It ricocheted through environmental groups, shared far and wide. The internet has a nose for injustice. It smelled this one a mile off. Security guards showed up at the site by afternoon. Thick-necked boys with earpieces shadowed my every step, like I was public enemy number 1. Cordelia rebranded me an environmental terrorist. She hired private protection to defend legitimate business interests. I wasn't the only one noticing. State investigators will be loading trucks soon, but she was going to finish before they arrived. Nail guns chattered from dawn to past midnight for 10 straight days. 45 cabins sprouted like mildew. She substituted speed for legality and hoped paperwork could catch up later. While she built, I watched. I mounted military-grade trail cameras, motion-activated, infrared, solar-powered, well-hidden, silent. They caught everything her crews thought nobody would see. Dumping concrete washout into wetlands. Diesel dripping onto protected soil. Barrel after barrel of paint and adhesive buried in shallow graves instead of being hauled to disposal. Each frame was a felony under environmental protection laws. Thursday night brought the jackpot. Infrared footage caught supervisors telling crews to dump adhesive containers into the marsh behind cabin row 12. The very wetland feeding the underground springs that kept my lake pristine. They just poisoned the federal water source on camera. By Labor Day weekend, 79 cabins stood where old-growth forests had been 6 weeks earlier. Cordelia planned a grand opening festival to celebrate progress, complete with state officials and cameras. She thought she'd beaten the crazy water guy. She had no idea she'd just invited witnesses to her own defeat. The weapon that would end her empire was waiting in Uncle Ezra's basement, behind the workbench where most men keep rifles. I hadn't opened the gun safe since we buried him. I tried birthdays and anniversaries. Nothing. Late one night, staring at Luna's grave marker, whiskey on my breath, I punched in the GPS coordinates of the lake's dead center. The safe opened like fate. Inside, oiled leather, the smell of machine oil and victory. Documents lay in perfect order. Ezra's handwriting neat as a blueprint. The original 1923 contract with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. Thornfield Lake wasn't just family land. It was a designated emergency water supply for 3 downstream counties during drought. Uncle Ezra was registered as an emergency water management operator with authority to control releases when conditions required. Federal authority. The kind that trumps everything else. Local zoning, county permits. Even the HOA bylaws she waved around like scripture. Drought data on Ezra's computer told the rest. 3 consecutive years of dropping tables. 18 months qualifying as a federal drought. The old man had been maintaining inspections and status for decades, stockpiling ammunition for a war he knew would come. He left me a nuclear option disguised as water rights. Here was my dilemma. If I pulled that trigger, the cabins would flood. Innocent people had sunk their savings into those boxes on stilts. Not everyone buying a lake place is evil. Some were retirees, some parents, some folks trying again after divorce. I stared at Ezra's notes until the basement swam, and I heard him anyway. Sometimes protecting what matters requires hard choices. I made mine. Cordelia would get one last chance to act like a human being, but I'd already written the ending in my head. You can't negotiate with greed. War needs allies. Ezra had left me names. I called Marcus Rivera, an environmental attorney who makes federal agencies remember they have teeth. When I mentioned the Bureau of Reclamation contract and Emergency Water Management Authority, he went quiet. Wade, he said finally, voice running hot with energy. Do you realize what you're sitting on? Federal Emergency Water Authority shuts cities down. It supersedes state and local nonsense. I'll take the case on contingency. That's when you know a lawyer smells blood. Next up was a hydrologist. Dr. Sarah Whitehorse at the State University had testified before Congress on water rights. Her voice carried the calm of people who explain complicated things to politicians with a 20-watt bulb upstairs. She agreed to do a full ecological assessment and calculate exactly what the lake would need to return to health. Her numbers would justify controlled flooding, restoration, not revenge. Then we needed a local who knew the construction game. Tank Morrison was a contractor built like his nickname and sharp as a nail. He bid on the HOA project and got mysteriously disqualified. He had paperwork on safety violations, permit fraud, and creative accounting. He also had credibility with folks who didn't trust city suits. He helped me upgrade the dam's control systems. 2, remote monitoring, redundant backups, and cameras record everything. Finally, I met Eleanor Crowfeather at the courthouse. She was an elderly clerk with kind eyes who'd helped me find old records. Turns out she was also tribal liaison to the Three Rivers Sioux Nation. This lake was sacred long before European settlement, she told me quietly. Our springs are healing waters. Her nephew, Chairman Robert Crowfeather, explained the nuclear reality. Indigenous cultural preservation law carries federal weight. If we could document ceremonial history at the lake, permits could be invalidated under the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. Tribal sovereignty plus federal water rights. That's how you turn a corrupt HOA into dust. It took 3 weeks to prepare. 3 weeks of midnight soldering in Ezra's workshop, backup power tests, and coordination calls that sounded like a war room. Marcus filed our emergency water authority paperwork and simultaneously challenged every HOA permit in environmental court. Dr. Whitehorse assembled ecological damage reports thick as bricks and calculated a precise flood profile to restore wetlands without risking lives. Tank documented violations and laid out the HOA's cash crisis. Their loans were a house of cards. Chairman Crowfeather's legal team filed cultural preservation claims that dropped like anchors. With 3 days to go, Cordelia started playing dirty. Saboteurs cut my main line and drained the generator. Amateurs. Ezra's journals had taught me redundancy. Solar panels in the equipment barn. A propane generator in the old root cellar. A diesel backup that could run a month. Trail cameras lit up the saboteurs' faces like they were on stage. The FBI field office in Helena found that very interesting. Then Cordelia slid into my booth at Murphy's Tavern with a martini and a smile and offered me $500,000 to disappear. Authorized by my investors, she said. We can resolve this amicably. When I asked what happened if I refused, she threatened legal fees, harassment charges, and hints about my mental stability after divorce. I let the silence stretch, took a sip of beer, and told her she just threatened a federal witness while I was wearing a wire. Watching the color drain from her face was a small joy. She hit me with a restraining order the day before the festival. No approaching the development within 500 feet. It looked scary on paper. Federal Emergency Water Authority made it worthless. Labor Day weekend rose up like thunderheads on the horizon. Cordelia hired a PR firm known for making oil spills sound like water incidents, blasted radio spots about extremists destroying family dreams, and staged a ribbon cutting with the lieutenant governor, state officials, and every camera within 100 miles. Meanwhile, Tank confirmed what we already suspected. The HOA owed contractors $2.8 million and had construction loans leveraged against pre-sold cabins that hadn't passed final inspection. The kindling was stacked. We brought the match. Saturday morning, I tested everything one last time. The dam control system connected to self-service, so I could operate valves from anywhere. Live stream cameras captured the lake, the cabins, the crowd, and the dam face. Marcus wanted ironclad proof that this was controlled, lawful water management under federal authority. Dr. Whitehorse's hydrological equations were loaded into the program to raise water exactly 12 feet. Enough to flood foundations and strip away fraud, but not enough to risk lives. The siren system was prepped. Agents were staged nearby. I stood over Ezra's grave and whispered the truth. There was no going back now. From a vantage a half-mile away, I watched the festival's barbecue smoke drift across water that would soon reclaim its banks. Tank texted. LG on site. News crews ready. Cordelia up at 3 o'clock. At 2:45, my phone buzzed. Emergency authority active. Federal approvals in. I typed a line that ended in Empire. Emergency protocol initiated. Control flooding begins at 1500. Cordelia started her speech at 3 on the dot. Today represents a triumph of progress over extremism. I opened the dam. The emergency sirens wailed, a long mechanical scream echoing through the valley. Head snapped. The sound rolled over that illegal suburbia like judgment. I pulled up in Uncle Ezra's restored 50s Ford pickup. The diesel rumbled turning heads as we rolled into view. In the bed, federal documents and a portable PA. With me, Marcus Rivera in his courtroom suit, FBI agent Sarah Chun with badge and sidearm, Dr. Whitehorse in her university vehicle, Chairman Crowfeather in his official SUV, and Tank with boxes of evidence. Cameras pivoted from the podium to us. The cavalry doesn't always ride horses. Ladies and gentlemen, I said into the mic, my voice carrying over rising water. I need to interrupt with federal business. Cordelia stood frozen, microphone clutched in white fingers, eyes ping-ponging between us and the lake edging up her foundations. Cordelia, I called out, you might want to step away before you say something that lands you in federal prison. She squeaked about harassment and calling the sheriff. The sheriff is already here, Agent Chin said, showing her credentials. As are federal investigators, environmental protection agents, and representatives of the Three Rivers Sioux Nation. Ms. Ashworth Banks, you're under arrest for conspiracy to defraud federal water management systems. Handcuffs clicked. The crowd erupted in anxious murmurs. Marcus took the mic. Every construction permit was obtained through fraudulent emergency declarations. These cabins were built in a federally designated flood zone without environmental review. Dr. Whitehorse showed photos of contaminated wetlands and dead fish, explaining 17 separate federal violations. Chairman Crow Feather stepped forward, his voice carrying generations. This lake is a sacred site under federal cultural preservation treaties. All development permits are invalid under the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. The land will be restored. Cordelia snapped. You can't do this. You're destroying families. No, I said, stepping close. You destroyed them when you sold illegal property and bribed officials. You destroyed them when you poisoned protected lake for profit. Water lapped at cabin steps, licking vinyl siding like truth. My control flood moved exactly as calculated. Dramatic for TV. Safe for people with basic sense. The flood will continue for 48 hours, I announced, to restore natural water levels and protect downstream communities under emergency water authority. A news anchor shoved a microphone toward me. Are you saying this development was illegal from the start? Yes, I said. This was an HOA scam fueled by permit fraud, insurance grifts, and county corruption. The law is correcting it. As agents led Cordelia past the cameras, she screamed that it wasn't over. It is, I told her. It's over. 6 months later, Cordelia Ashworth Banks was serving 18 months for conspiracy, environmental crimes, and tampering with federal water infrastructure. Her mugshot, mascara smeared, fake lashes tilted, made the rounds online on a caption, When Karens Meet Federal Authority. The cabin buyers filed a class action suit and recovered about 80% of their investments from flood insurance and seized HOA assets. Investigators found Cordelia had been skimming construction funds to feed gambling debts. 3 casinos worth of bad luck. The real victory was what we built out of the wreckage. Every Labor Day, the Thornfield Lake Conservation Festival draws about 10,000 visitors for workshops on water rights, environmental law, and responsible development. Last year, Dr. Whitehorse headlined and laid out how communities can beat corrupt HOAs and bought-off officials when they know their rights. My daughter Emma, now 17, interned with our education team, teaching students how federal water rights and indigenous cultural laws protect places like ours. She wants to study environmental engineering. I try not to cry when she talks about it. Our case set a legal precedent. Federal emergency water authorities superseding local corruption. That's already been cited in a dozen lawsuits across 4 states. Mark has built an entire practice around busting crooked developers and HOA scams. The FBI investigation uncovered 15 years of kickbacks and permit fraud in the county. Margaret Chase resigned in disgrace. Her replacement, Elena Vargas, grew up on a ranch and understands land stewardship isn't a campaign slogan. The trust established scholarships for local kids in environmental science, conservation law, or sustainable agriculture. 23 students from ranch families and small towns have gone to college on those funds, choosing careers that protect the land instead of strip mining it. Tank Morrison got the contract to build trust facilities using sustainable construction. He employs 47 people who might have left for city work. Chairman Crow Feather co-chairs our board. Combining tribal wisdom with modern conservation is not just the right thing. It's effective. People listen when you can point to restored wetlands and returning wildlife. Most evenings now I walk the shoreline where Luna used to drink. New growth reaches for the sky where bulldozers erase giants. Trail cameras that once filmed crimes now capture otters rolling in shallow water, herons fishing, and deer stepping lightly at dawn. Ezra's workshop is our headquarters, the regular hum of ideas replacing the old electric hum. We teach water rights, environmental law, and how to fight corruption with real documents and clean hands. The lake smells like spring water again, the kind that rinses years of grit off your soul. Here's where I want you to take with you. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just getting even. It's building something better from the ashes of what they tried to destroy. Federal water rights, original land grants, tribal sovereignty, environmental protection. These aren't abstract ideas. They're tools. In the right hands, they're shields and swords. Now it's your turn. What would you do if a corrupt HOA tried to steal your family land with fake surveys and bought-off officials? Tell me your worst HOA horror story in the comments and where you're watching from. If the story of property rights, wetlands restoration, and federal water management gave you a little justice-fueled satisfaction, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone fighting their own battle. You're watching HOA Stories, where entitled bullies and illegal developments get a reality check. New chapters drop every week. Don't miss the next one.